glad to be here with Pat McGuigan again on a Saturday morning. And Pat, we are entering kind of a new area in local politics here, and the swearing in of the new legislature took place earlier this week.
Yes, and the House, we don't know a lot of the details on who will be running what. The Senate, it's beginning to emerge. Several notable well-known Republicans will be in the driver's seat if everything goes according to plan. Men like Clark Jolly, John Ford, Dan Newberry, David Holt, new guy, and Gary Stanislawski from Tulsa. They're going to be playing key leadership roles under Senator Bingman and Senator Schultz, who we've talked about previously. Kris Steele is definitely laying the basis on the House side for a very serious look at corrections policy and alternatives to incarceration, to making some pretty bold statements, and he spoke about that in Tulsa this past week. So I look for that as actually being one of the more interesting and significant policy issues, because something's got to be done on the cost side, and of course it's the incentives and the way our system is structured that drive the costs. So looking at alternatives, that may be a smaller percentage of the problem than people hope, but alternatives to incarceration, and then very significantly looking at what you do with folks while they're on the inside of our prisons and jails. So that's going to be a big issue. The pension programs got back to center stage again this week as Treasurer Scott Meacham presided over his last meeting focused on pensions. He's the chairman by law of the Pension Commission. The commission unanimously approved a resolution that, among other things, said no COLAs, or cost of living adjustments, no automatic COLAs, and they have put limits on what the legislature can do to affect that. Meacham said something very interesting. He said the problem's been a lack of discipline. And that's a pretty apt description, because in bad budget years of the past, not recently, but in the past, what the legislature did is they'd sweeten the pot a little bit on retirement when they couldn't give people a pay increase. And that built in this systemic problem. Right now, $16.5 billion estimated liability if the bill all came due at once, which of course it won't.
Right.
But how do you get from the 40s to the 70% adequate funding to 80, which is that minimal level? There's alternative ideas to what Meacham has recommended, a little more aggressive in some way, to use cash flow and work your way out of it. Debates about defined benefit versus defined contribution. Defined benefit is the system we have now. The actuaries out there understand, everybody else, their eyes might start glazing over, but this is going to be an important debate. It will be front and center because it has to be. There's really not an alternative to just leave the status quo. So corrections, pensions, and of course budget, which both of those fall right into. Budget's going to be huge, and the challenges are breathtaking in a lot of ways, and the thing to understand is that we're in better shape in Oklahoma than most states, and in better shape than the federal government. Still, it's going to be very challenging to fill that $500 million plus or minus budget hole. So they're going to try to hit the ground running on that. We'll see. I think it's going to be tough. Last thing, education reform. We've talked before about the impact of this election on the power of the Oklahoma Education Association and its clout at the Capitol. They're still a player. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the recent special needs bill that passed, but also broader education reform in the form of parental choice, and then looking at some of the administrative costs as a way that you might be able to still deliver the classroom instruction without spending as much on superintendents and administrators. So that's that issue. There you go.
Nothing big.
The whole state budget in 3.5 minutes, right?
Let's talk about our lawmakers at the federal level. Our congressional delegation could have some clout this year, is that right?
Yeah, I think Tom Coburn, it's very difficult to overstate the extent of his influence and clout right now in Washington for two reasons. The first is that he got some things right politically. Those are matters of principle to him. Principle's great. The way you deliver principles into public policy is timing and political clout. And Coburn won most of the arguments this year about earmarks. He's won arguments within the Republican caucus. Republicans are dramatically strengthened in the Senate, And Coburn, the flip side to Coburn is that he really has managed to maintain a personal, cordial relationship with President Obama because of their past history together in the Senate. So I watch for Coburn to really, really be a player. And I use the word really twice because I can't overstate it. I think he's going to be very significant. Jim Inhofe, even though he disagreed with most of his party on the earmark issue, is going to be greatly strengthened foreign policy, national defense, where he's a gray head, if you will, and a man with some knowledge and authority. Not just a conservative, but a guy that knows the nitty-gritty issues. Tom Cole, Frank Lucas. Cole is a historian by training and inclination, and he understands this is an incredible moment for the Republicans and a moment in American history that doesn't come along that often. He's a little more moderate than some might like, and yet he understands this is the moment to be talking about the 10th Amendment. What should government be doing, and what things should it leave to the states and the localities? That's not an arcane argument. It was made very relevant by the recent election. And finally, the new guy, Jim Lankford and John Sullivan in Tulsa, they're both going to be comparatively more powerful than might have been expected if Democrats had retained the Congress.
You mentioned education reform, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this film that's out called Waiting for Superman. It's not in wide release, but it is out there for people to see if they want to see it.
Yeah,
it's quite powerful.
I'd say it has the potential, at least in America, to be as impactful as the previous movie that Davis Guggenheim, the producer and director and the writer of much of the script, did. Guggenheim is the guy that brought to the film world An Inconvenient Truth, working with Al Gore. Guggenheim is a liberal. All of the heroes of this story are personally liberals in their political inclinations, and yet the story that's put together by this guy is an incredible indictment of the current state of affairs in American public education, especially in the urban areas, where he methodically documents what he calls failure factories and their problems. It's a movie of great integrity and honesty on Guggenheim's part, because although he's a liberal, he talked about the fact that the only school he could find in Los Angeles he was content to put his own children in was a private school. And everything flows from that. It's a great analysis of the impact of good, high-performing charter schools on the lives of inner-city kids of every possible hue and color, although he also touches on problems in suburban schools. It's a magnificent movie. I've always been sympathetic to education reform and to school choice. This is the most important movie, in my opinion, of the 21st century for America. Now, others may disagree with that, but I encourage them to see the movie and decide for themselves. It'll be out on DVD before long, and I think here and there you can still find it in the theaters.
Very good. Well, I concur. Absolutely see it if you can. Pat, thank you very much. As always, you can read more about these topics and others at CapitolBeatOK.com. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.